Hi, everyone. So I heard from a few people that you were confused. There was some confusion regarding the Tableau exercises. And one of the more difficult things about integrating Tableau into this class is understanding that some people are more familiar, more comfortable working with data and doing even simple analysis than other people are. And so I put this presentation together to get everyone on the same page, hopefully, to answer any questions that you might have about about actually doing the analysis for the exercise. So, basic steps in terms of starting the process. The first thing you want to know is, or think about, are what questions do you need to have answered? You have um, as with happens with business all the times, you have this information that you've put together. You put together budget, the hiring plan, all of that happened before you heard that Oprah was going to mention the company name. So now you have this additional revenue boost that you need to plan for in terms for the workforce. And so you need to think about all the questions that you need to answer with relation to how are you going to accommodate the company, or what needs to be put in place for the company in order to accommodate this additional growth. Step two is determine how the data you do have can be used to answer the questions. The data that you've received, the Excel spreadsheets, and I highly recommend that you take a look at them um, before, or at some point in time, look at them just by themselves, just to get an idea of what the type of data that they all include. With the exception of the year-to-date sales, the year-to-date sales really are actual. It's all dummy. It's dummy data, but it's a much larger spreadsheet than the other three. And you need to work with the data, experiment with it, work with it. Again, like, take a look at it, look at all of the information that it contains and the type of information that it contains, and then open it up in Tableau and experiment with the data. Turn the data into visualizations, and I actually have an example of how to do that in a included it later on in this presentation. And finally, you want to be able to add your insights to the data visualizations. So this is just a list of questions that to think about in terms of what type of questions need to be answered. What is the projected revenue growth? What does the additional 38% mean? How many additional employees need to be hired or promoted to accommodate the projected 38% growth in revenue? Obviously, if you know that you're going to have an instant increase in your sales, you want to be able to put a plan in place so that your current employees aren't overstretched, or worse, you aren't able to meet your sales requirements or your sales demands. Again, the hiring plan is included in as part of the data. And think about, should you reallocate hires in the hiring plan? Do you need to move people? Again, think about this from the perspective of you're going to be selling a lot more items than what you normally would, or what you anticipated. So what departments are going to need more help? Obviously manufacturing, because they create the product. So think about, do you need to allocate, or should you recommend to reallocate hires in the hiring plan? Another simple analysis that proves to be very useful is looking at the revenue per employee. And I have an example of that in the exercise, the Tableau exercise that I do or create later in the presentation. How many employees should be promoted in January 2019? The case study indicates that the company likes to hit a projected goal. So when you're thinking about, okay, how many people do we really need to hire to in order for this anticipated growth, think about, in addition to new hires, how many folks do we want to promote, or how many can we promote? And is the current 2019 budget plan sufficient to hire the additional staff? Do you need to add more people to the hiring plan? If so, is your current projected budget enough? And in terms of, like, when you're looking at or thinking about adding additional employees, so say you want to add 6 more people in manufacturing, it's perfectly okay to use the salaries in the hiring plan. I didn't deviate them that much for a reason. Don't focus too much on that, or don't let that get you too hung up. And another question that you would want to answer is, where can you make budget cuts to hire additional people? Again, if you don't have the budget for it, or if you have to reallocate some of the hires to different departments, what areas within HR realm, and the budget actually includes learning and development, benefits that would be very hard to cut. But think about where you can make budget cuts if necessary. And what is the projected total compensation of current employees and new hires? What is your payroll going to look like next year when you've got these additional hires as well as your current employee pool? So some things to keep in mind before we go over the Tableau exercise, just to kind of reassure you that about what I'm looking for and what you need to do. You're basically playing detective. The data is your clue to connecting the dots. The data is going to help you answer the questions that you've asked. Because this is a fictional scenario, the majority of the answers to the questions will be subjective, regardless of the number of, you will need to provide data in order to back up your recommendations, but that doesn't necessarily mean that 30 versus 40, there's a right or wrong answer in between the two. But this is part of the process when you're in terms of doing the analysis. Don't be afraid to experiment with the data until you create the visualization that you want. As you'll see in the exercise that I'm going to show you, take your time with the data in terms of using the different fields in different areas, moving it around. Get it to look the way you want and the way you feel comfortable. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. You don't have to create 15 formulas in one data sheet. Keep it simple. The data was specifically created to include anomalies and imperfections, and point out these anomalies as part of your insights. I purposely made the data imperfect because, no data is perfect. And so there's some things to catch in the data and that you should be able to see once you start doing your analysis. As is the case in real life, sometimes you'll discover the additional issues when you do doing this type of analysis. For instance, did the company promote enough employees in 2018 to meet their goal? Did they really hit 20%? Let's see. Are there any pay inequities by gender? Are there any performance inequities in terms of performance ratings by department or gender? Where are there, again, what I would consider to be anomalies, and in identifying those, you can use that as part of your insights for your exercise. It's okay if you don't answer every single question listed here. That's not the goal. The goal is to get you started with understanding how to ask the questions and then how to use the data to answer those questions. And you might think of additional questions that aren't even listed here. There's so many different perspectives that you can take with this scenario, and I purposely left it relatively open-ended because, again, there's no final list of questions that have to be answered. Therefore, you can think outside the box and maybe come up with your own questions that don't appear in this presentation. And it's okay to think outside of the box when coming up with your answers. Most of your answers will actually become recommendations. For instance, once you've figured out how many additional employees that should be hired to accommodate the growth, think about it for in the scenario of, for the instance with the manufacturing employees, you could always hire temporary or seasonal people. So don't feel like you have to adhere to any rigid standards when it comes to making the recommendations. Utilize the data to find answers to the questions, and then based on those answers, make your recommendations. Don't overthink the questions, the formulas. You only need to do the most basic analysis. Again, the objective of the Tableau exercises is not to make you relive your worst statistics class nightmare, but it's really just to get you comfortable with the process and help you to understand that as an HR professional, this is going to be part of your day-to-day life for the majority of you going into HR. Again, revenue per employee calculation is basically just the amount of the revenue divided by the average number of employees for whatever period you're looking at. So for 2018, it's, again, total revenue divided by 96, which is what we consider the average number of employees would be. That's what the current headcount is. So use that as the average for the entire year of 2018. So right now I'm going to switch over. I created a screencast of, how to use data in Tableau in terms of determining this answering the one question about revenue. What is the amount of revenue per employee? So this is using data in Tableau. So as you can see, I've created I'm in a blank worksheet. I'm in the year-to-date cells. I'm first adding the order date, which Tableau will automatically truncate the dates or categorize them by year, month, quarters, etc. I am now creating a calculated field, which again, the calculation for revenue per employee is your total revenue divided by your number of employees. So once I have that information, I'm dropping that into the worksheet, and I'm going to use Show Me to create a different visualization. Instead of the line chart, I wanted to create bars. And again, use this as an opportunity to experiment with the data. I'm adding my revenue per employee field to both the color and the data so that I can break up the information by showing it in different colors, gradiated colors, as well as add the actual dollar amounts to the worksheet. So now I've decided, in terms of looking at revenue per employee, I really only care about 2018 because that's going to be what I use to do my 2019 projections, or what we're going to be looking at for 2019. So I'm going to go through and filter out the data. And, one line of data, it's okay, but it might be more interesting to look at it on a quarter basis. Again, we're assuming or going from the premise that the data that you have is current as of today, which is, we're in mid-October. So you might want to only use Q1 of 2018 because it's over and done with. And 2018, Q4, isn't completely done. So again, this is just one very simplistic way of using the data in Tableau and putting it together to create a visualization. So now what I'm going to do is take you through, from Tableau to the final exercise. And this is an example of a Tableau exercise that I put together using the visualization that I just created. So one of the first things you should notice at the top, I've added, the Tableau exercise number, my name. Sylvia Doss is actually another instructor who's going to begin teaching this course, as well as she's been helping me with put the case study and information together. And what I did in Tableau is I went back in and added a breakdown of the country. So now you actually see the revenue per employee based on country and quarter for 2018. And I also created a second visualization that is my projected revenue increase, and so it says Oprah in brackets. So what I did is created another calculated field in a different worksheet, and basically added 38% to the 2018 revenue. So even though this says year of order date is 2018, this is really kind of to give me a snapshot of what my 2019 revenue is going to look like based on this 38% bump. And so by looking at both of these worksheets, I've identified some anomalies and made some decisions, and that's what you're going to do in terms of how do you put together your insights. At the bottom, as you'll see, I decided to use just US Q1 US data for the revenue, because again, this is, you can do this any way you like, but you can do your recommendations for hiring based on the country, based on revenue per country. And so that was kind of the perspective I was using in this first exercise. So I took the projected revenue of for Q1 US and divided that by what I found to be the revenue per employee for Q1 in the US. And so that equals 134 employees. Well, we have 96 employees currently. So that gives you an idea. Again, very simplistic. Don't overthink it. But this is a very simple way of kind of looking at how many employees to hire. Look at your current hiring plan. How many employees does it currently have? And then, look at what the revenue per employee tells you, and get an idea of how many additional, or maybe you have too many people, or too many people are included in the hiring plan. So based on that, again, we've come up with two insights from these two different graphs. We recommend adding X number to the hiring plan, or we recommend promoting an additional X number of employees in January. So again, no right or wrong way to necessarily phrase that, but use the information that you glean from Tableau and from doing creating the visualizations to create recommendations or your insights. And again, I'm thinking about increased revenue. We know there's going to be a higher demand for our product. Therefore, we know that certain departments are going to be more busy. So increased sales will mean more production. We recommend majority of new hires in the manufacturing department. Be creative, think outside of the box when it comes to your recommendations, but also look at it from a realistic perspective. What happens when you have a bump in sales? What happens when you have a higher demand for your products? You need more people in certain departments. So keep those things in mind when you're going through and doing the analysis. And so that's the end of my presentation, and I hope that this will answer questions for everyone in terms of what to do and what's expected. If you have any additional questions or you continue to be confused, please contact me right away. You can email me, but the best way to reach me is to call me or send me a text message at 408-207-2135. Okay? Good luck, everyone. Thank you.